All right, there's also plenty of political fallout and reaction from lawmakers on this consequential week for Donald Trump, including from Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell, who issued this statement after the January 6th committee hearing. The entire nation knows who is responsible for that day. Beyond that, I don't have any immediate observations. Joining me now, Alice Stewart, CNN political commentator, Republican strategist, Olivia Troye, former advisor to Vice President Mike Pence. Alice, let me start with you on that statement from Mitch McConnell. There are some analysts who call this bold, say it's a zinger. This is a major statement from him. Is it? He doesn't even name him.
Look, this speaks the truth. This is Senator McConnell speaking the truth, and his feelings are shared by many rational Republicans that I've been speaking with over the last days and weeks. The entire nation does know not only what happened, but how it played out, and now they know who's responsible. We're hearing from other top Republican leaders say that they're really disappointed with what happened, but they're glad that the facts are out there. And others are saying this is now certainly in the hands of the Justice Department. But look, while this is now being litigated in the court of law, the court of public opinion is turning on Donald Trump. And we're seeing more and more people see that what we saw throughout the course of this January 6th committee was not just what happened, but we heard it, we saw it, and we felt it. And people understand that that was absolutely wrong. There was no question that this was something that shouldn't have happened. We should have never questioned the outcome of the election. We should have never questioned certification of the election. And we certainly should not have allowed this insurrection at the Capitol. But let me also point out this as well, Victor. There are also some Republicans that say that this January 6th committee, they view this as a joke. They say that this was nothing more than an effort just to pass forward criminal referrals. Some even agree with Donald Trump that they look at this as a corrupt process. But more and more rational Republicans are disagreeing with that, and they are siding more with the McConnell wing of this, that not only should January 6th not have happened, but those responsible, like Donald Trump, should be held responsible.
So, Olivia, your former boss, the former Vice President Mike Pence, is not going as far as some of those Republicans that Alice just mentioned. Let's listen, and then we'll talk.
I would hope that they would not bring charges against the former president. I don't. Look, as I wrote in my book, I think the president's actions and words on January 6th were reckless. But I don't know that it's criminal to take bad advice from lawyers. I hope the Justice Department understands the magnitude of the very idea of indicting a former president of the United States. I think that would be terribly divisive in the country.
Olivia, he's going further than some Republican senators we've heard from over the last 24 hours or so. And according to Cassidy Hutchinson, former President Trump agreed with the protesters who were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Why is he doing this? Is this a political calculation?
Yeah, I think it is. But look, I think Mike Pence is having an identity crisis right now. It's like, who do you want to be? Do you want to be the rational, true conservative and pull apart from the MAGA field and actually differentiate yourself from Donald Trump? Or do you want to play the Donald Trump apologist repeatedly and continue to coddle that and then continue to try to court those voters that are never going to come back to you? Why not show some leadership and strength? Why not stand by McConnell's statement? Why not come forward and say, all of this is just gone too far. It almost led to my death. We need to be going in a different direction. And also the Department of Justice, no one is above the law. And if Donald Trump did this, which the committee has done a great job of laying out the facts by Republicans, I will say, Republicans who served loyally in the Trump administration. Most of these voices were people who were conservatives, people like Judge Ludev, people like Rusty Bowers in Arizona. All of these witnesses actually are part of the GOP. So to kind of try to spin it and say, oh, it's partisan, which Pence has been doing, and then also kind of attack the DOJ as part of it. And, you know, I think it's just beyond ridiculous. And then also, I think it's reflecting very poorly on him.
And Victor, if I can just follow up, Olivia would know better than most people in terms of Mike Pence is certainly being cautious. And he, like many Republicans, don't want to suffer the fallout of being attacked by Donald Trump, which many people have feared for years. But what we're seeing now is that these criminal referrals give a lot of Republicans permission to turn the page. That gives them permission to look elsewhere and turn their backs on Donald Trump, because enough is enough. And now we have options out there with regard to 2024, and I do believe this criminal referral will help that.
But Alice, you say that this is giving Republicans cover to go in a different direction. Trump sent out on his social media page that people who love freedom rally around me after this. This strengthens me. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Now, you could change out people who love freedom to people who love Trump. This may strengthen him. But is there a good gauge among the electorate of how much this does or does not strengthen him? That's you, Alice.
Sure. His base is going to, as you said, they are going to solidify behind him, and it will probably embolden his base. But there are a lot of people who have been really disenchanted with Donald Trump and his behavior since he left office. And what he also said in his statement was he accused the, quote, unselect committee of being corrupt cowards. Look, nothing says corrupt coward like an elected official who sends your supporters to the Capitol to do your bidding. And more people are recognizing the fact that his behavior that day is simply unacceptable and certainly is disqualifying for anyone to be the president of the United States in the future.
Olivia, let me finish with you on this Republican Congressman-elect George Santos. New York Times, the first report, CNN has now corroborated no records that NYU and Baruch College have to support his claims that he earned degrees there. His campaign biography included claims of experience at Citigroup and Goldman Sachs. No record of that at those companies. What should Kevin McCarthy do here? And keep in context that he's still looking for 218 votes. And if this man wanted to, he could say, listen, you've got my vote, but you can't come after me for this question of my credentials.
Yeah, look, that's the reality of the situation, right? Kevin McCarthy needs that vote. So I don't think he's going to do anything. What he should do, well, he should hold this person accountable. And I think it would be important to do that because it should also speak to the credibility of the Republican Party, which is already waning significantly in terms of how the far right and the party behaves and the fact that they are the base of the party right now and their demeanor. And so do you want this guy sitting there who basically lied about his entire background? Now, like, there's a really easy way to clear this out for this representative. If this is all false and I've seen the attacks where he's saying that it's the left attacking him, well, then he should produce the documents that will refute this and we can clear this up real quickly. I'll say this, though. I think it's abhorrent about the fact that what I find most abhorrent is the fact that he lied potentially about having had employees that died, that were killed in that Pulse nightclub shooting. I think that is actually just completely disgusting. And I think that speaks to his character that would even fathom like something that would come out of his mouth if it's not true.
You know, if it is better than it looks, people will rush to tell you. Olivia Troye, Alice Stewart, thank you.